I call the member for McPherson.
Hear, hear.
Thank you, Mr Deputy Speaker. And I've got a message for the mums and dads of Australia. And that very simple message is that your kids will get a better quality education under a coalition government than you will ever get for your kids under a Labor government. And the reason that that's going to happen is because the coalition government is the government of quality education. Now, we know on this side of the House that funding is important, but what you do with that funding is just, if not more, important than the quantum of the funding. And there are numerous examples which I'm sure those opposite, if they have read the reports that are available about the standards of our education here in Australia and the comparison with education standards overseas, they would know that here in Australia we have a lot of work to do to ensure that our kids can compete internationally, can compete globally, because despite the record funding that is being injected into education, our standards are unfortunately slipping. And the time has come when we need to face up to the fact that significant work has to be done, focusing on the quality of education here in Australia. Now, we all know on this side that funding of schools is a responsibility of the state and territory governments and the Commonwealth governments. The Commonwealth provides about 1/3 of the funding to schools, of government funding to schools, with the states and the territory governments providing the remainder. Now, I've already said that school funding under this government is at record levels over the forward estimates. We can also demonstrate very clearly that the Commonwealth contribution is outpacing the contributions of the states and the territories. But I'm not necessarily here today to have a debate about the quantum of the funding. I'm actually here because I'm interested in a good quality outcome in education for our students. And as I've indicated before, we know that there is not necessarily a direct link between the quantum of funding and the outcome.
Very clear.
And that's been demonstrated in a number of studies, particularly when we start to compare ourselves with many of the overseas countries that have a much lower per capita gross domestic product than Australia actually has. And yet they are outperforming us. So we know that there are other things that you actually need.
Member McPherson, I was waiting for this to settle down. The Deputy Leader of the Opposition was heard in silence. I'd expect that same respect to be given to the member for McPherson. So if we could have a bit of silence. Thank you, member for McPherson.
Thank you, Mr Deputy Speaker. And I maintain that we are the government of quality education. And we are going to proceed down that path. We have a plan, which we've already started implementing, to make sure that we regain the rightful position that we should have in international education standards, that we are providing the students of Australia with a quality education that they so desperately need, but was unable to be delivered under the previous government. So we have released the Quality Schools Quality Outcomes paper, which has 5 key areas that we are focused on into the future. The first one is boosting literacy, numeracy and STEM performance. Now, we aren't just talking about it, we're actually out there doing it, because we've recognised we have a lot of work to do to make sure that we are graduating students with high-level STEM skills. And at the moment, unfortunately, that isn't happening. But when we released the National Innovation and Science Agenda last year, we made a $64 million contribution to initiatives that will improve the teaching and learning of STEM in the early learning and schools programs. That is going to be of enormous benefit, because we know that whilst we can't actually define what the jobs of the future are going to be, 75% of those jobs will require skills in mathematics, in engineering, in technology and in science. And we need to make sure that we are equipping our kids for those jobs of the future. So the second pillar of the Quality Schools and Quality Outcomes paper is improving the quality of teaching and school leadership, doing the things that make a difference. The third one is preparing our students for a globalised world where they can get a job and they compete with the other students who are, at this stage, ahead of them globally. The fourth one is focusing on what matters most and those who need it the most, genuine attention to needs. And the fifth one is increasing public accountability through improved transparency. So we've got a plan. We're well on the way to implementing that plan, and it's focused on quality. But we, on this side of the House, have a holistic approach to education. We don't necessarily compartmentalise education. We look at education as a highway, which starts with early childhood education, goes through school, vocational education and through onto higher education. And let me tell you, if we want to talk about cuts, the biggest cuts that caused the most damage, the ones that brought vocational education to its knees, were those that were made by those on the other side of the House. When Bill Shorten was in the education portfolio and there were 9 successive cuts to employer incentives in vocational education of $1.2 billion, Labor has brought vocational education in this country to its knees. What you did, what those on the other side did to apprentices, we have been unable to recover. And I understand that you have the great initiative of holding a summit, and that will resolve all of the issues. Well, you're too late, Ethel, because we've already been out there consulting. We have spent months out there on the ground talking to the people that understand and know about vocational education so that we are informed about the policies of the future that are going to go a long way to fix the problems that Labor created in vocational education when they ripped $1.2 billion out of vocational education and brought it to its knees. So we've been undertaking a program of talking to school students, to students who are looking to move into vocational education, to mature age workers. We have been talking to businesses. We have been talking to training providers. We've been talking to the private providers. We have been talking to the TAFE colleges. We have been making sure that we are fully informed about what the issues are in vocational education, because it's important that we understand that vocational education is very much based on the successes that students have as they go through school, go into vocational education, which in fact is a destination on its own, but is a pathway into higher education. And what we know is that we need to improve and increase the number of commencements in apprenticeships, and we need to improve the completions. They dropped dramatically when Labor cut $1.2 billion and brought it to its knees. And I don't know why the people on the opposite side fail to recognise the damage that they have done to vocational education in this country. They hold themselves up as the gurus, the ones that understand vocational education. Well, start taking a little bit of responsibility for what you actually did, because you've come so close to destroying what could have been a world-class system. So you've brought it to its knees, and there is so much work that needs to be done now to try and just bring the level up, to restore some confidence in the community, to restore some confidence to the employers that we're not going to cut the rug out from underneath them yet again. And that's the damage that Labor has done, and they did it consistently. 9 successive cuts. $1.2 billion, 2011 to 2013 you did it, time and time again, and you didn't know when to stop. And unfortunately, by the time you'd finished with vocational education, it was damaged almost beyond repair. So face up to a little bit of responsibility on the other side, understand what you've done, and if you can't be productive, if you can't be part of the solution, then get out of the way and let those that can fix it actually do it, and that's us.